are some of these anti-CRT laws ones that, would legitimately make people nervous about talking about those subjects because, for fear that the, wrong parent could think that they're running afoul of some of this stuff, then I actually do think that's a legitimate concern.
When people teach Nazism, not only am I not concerned that the teachers are not Nazis, but I'm also not concerned that like people understand what it is. Like if teacher starts talking about Nazis, everyone understands what it is. If people start talking about CRT, it is vague because not just that there are people on the right that do label things that are not CRT, but because there has been a completely dishonest or ignorant attempt by the mainstream media to basically just say, oh, CRT is just teaching about Black history. CRT is just teaching about systemic racism. And that's not true.
Do you think that critical race theory makes the declaration that whites are oppressing Black people, that the wealth disparities that exist in society today are a product of racism?
Yeah, and I think that to the extent that what they mean is the first thing, then I think they've maybe got a defensible case. To the extent that what they mean is something like the P plus P definition of racism, right? Prejudice plus power, then I think it's way more dubious because I don't actually think that that's the sort of main,
So you disagree with them?
Yeah, no,
okay.
I really hope it's been clear.
So look, we're an hour and 15 minutes in. I'm just trying to get things on track here. Look, you wrote an article, and you made a declaration in the article that Christopher Hitchens would not be in favor of banning CRT. And I went back and I read the article before this conversation, and I guess some of the bills talk about banning divisive concepts, right? Would you consider creationism a divisive concept?
Yeah, but I don't think that's why you shouldn't teach it.
Okay, so creationism is a divisive concept. Do you think Christopher Hitchens would be in favor of banning creationism?
I think, I mean, I maybe would. I actually don't think Hitchens would. And the reason I say that is primarily that I think I've actually seen places where he says that he wouldn't. But I think that...
So do you think Christopher Hitchens would be in favor of teaching creationism in public schools if the teachers were teaching it as if it was fact, as if it was true?
Yeah, so I think it's probably not going to be a useful way to have this conversation to sort of do the sort of big Socratic buildup. Like, I think we could just kind of say what we think, and and if you think, oh,
well, I'm making a point here, and it sounds like you agree with me that Christopher Hitchens would ban something that was being taught that was factually incorrect, like creationism, in public schools. Like, I understand that the language divisive concept is nebulous.
This is why I think it's really useful to just sort of make the argument. And then if you want to say, hey, here's why I think that argument would apply to creationism, we can have that discussion. I think that I think that basically anti-CRT laws, and I know you guys are Blocked and Reported fans. If you've listened to the episodes of that show where they talk about the anti-CRT laws, what you'll hear them say is that basically they fall into two categories. Some of the anti-CRT laws are just purely performative. They're redundantly rebanning things that would have already been illegal anyway, like sort of forcing students to affirm, beliefs and, things that, et cetera, that political statements that would already be illegal under other laws. And then...
So you don't object to that, obviously, because they're already illegal, right?
Yeah, I think some of them are just dumb and performative, but they're not going to do any damage. I think the ones that I'm worried about are the ones that aren't redundant. And what I would worry about there. And again, I think if you listen to these episodes, they do a good job of sort of breaking down a lot of the details of these, and it's helpful. Is that none of them, that like they tend to be written, a lot of these, in such a vague way that I think there's going to be a real chilling effect on even broaching certain topics, because it's so unclear what would actually break the law, that if you're a teacher who doesn't want to get into trouble, the sort of path of least resistance is to just like entirely steer clear of subjects that
Look, I agree. I totally agree with you there. And the divisive concepts.
Completely.
Well, I'll let you speak. Okay. Let me just finish. Look, I think the point that I want to make is, and look, I'm not trying to gotcha you, Ben. I'm really not. Look, I think Christopher Hitchens obviously would have been in favor of banning things like creationism if it was being taught as it was fact in public schools, because it's not factual. So if you're looking at CRT, the question that we have to ask is, are they teaching stuff that is kind of CRT-ish? You know, I know a lot of people object to, they think, okay, well, this white privilege walk stuff is not necessarily CRT. If you don't want to call it CRT, you can call it whiteness studies, whatever it is. If that thing that they're teaching is not based in reality, is not factually correct, and we can have a conversation about that, I think Christopher Hitchens would have been in favor of banning it. I don't think people should be teaching stuff in school that is not objectively true or correct, and that was Christopher Hitchens' message. So
yeah, so I disagree with I think most of the components of that. So let me just run through that really quickly. So I think that I think context matters a lot, and one of the reasons that I'm not that moved by that analogy to creationism is that I think that the sort of context of like humanities kinds of classes, social studies, literature, etc., is very different from the context of science classes. And putting aside what Hitchens' position was, which, I guess we can go back and look at the things that he's written about this, but but my position would be, if you had like a philosophy class, we generally, if we're living in France, everybody would be taking that in high school, and the US, not so much. But like, if you have like outside of like some private schools and stuff, if you have like a philosophy class in high school, and I would have no problem whatsoever with people reading like arguments for the existence of God, like, Alvin Plantinga or, Thomas Aquinas or something in a high school philosophy class. I think the problem is in a science class. I think that the objection about creationism is about standards of scientific rigor. And I guess part of the question here, just really quickly, might be like, what do you think the goal is of a school? What do you think the goal is of these classes? And, if one of the big things that we're trying to do with public education is to make people, better citizens in a democracy, that I think, I think encouraging critical thinking skills is important. And that's one of the reasons I've said, when I've written about this a couple of times, that even though I actually disagree about tons of stuff with people like Derek Bell, like if you took one of those, I don't think it's very good literature, but if you took one of those like Derek Bell short stories to like illustrate some of his ideas and like plunked that into an English or social studies class, I would have no problem with that whatsoever. I think that
let me ask you a question, Ben. Sure. If you could teach a story to people as factually correct, that was complete lies, okay? And it doubled people's critical reasoning skills. Should we teach that class?
No, but I think that the way that a good teacher should be presenting texts that you're reading in anything like a social studies, history, English, etc. I think that the way, like any kind of primary sources that you're reading there, or really anytime you're talking about just controversial ideas, I don't think that the sort of role of a good teacher is to tell people exactly what they should think about those controversial ideas.
Look, I agree, but my point is that there are fact claims inside critical race theory that I think are factually incorrect and do not belong in the classroom. So, Sitch, you said you disagreed with me, but go ahead.
So really quickly on the Hitchens point, just because this was all introduced with him,
right?
One half of the reason that I was thinking about this was right in the Hitchens book. One half of the reason I think that there are lots of things I have no idea where it would have come down on, but one half of the reason I'm pretty confident about this one is about some of his, like very strong defenses of the idea that we want to have sort of open discussion about controversial ideas and all that. But the other half is that he would agree actually much more than I would, I think, with a lot of the factual claims you're objecting to. I mean, Christopher Hitchens supported reparations. He you can watch a debate from like late 2001 about it. There's like an anthology about reparations that that he's in. I mean, a lot of the stuff that he said about that, I think that I think he would actually be closer to their side than even me, and definitely you.
Well, so I think a better comparison than creationism to teaching CRT would be Nazism, because my issue with it's like, so if you have kids and they're in history class in high school and they're learning about World War II, I don't have a problem with the teacher saying like, talking about like the Nazis, and you have to explain what the Nazis believe so that you can understand the context of what the war is. But we're not sitting there thinking, well, the teacher is actually a secret Nazi. The teacher is advocating for the, Nazistic thinking or policies. We don't really have that concern. If we did have a concern that there were a bunch of Nazis infiltrating our school, then I think we would be a lot more hesitant to, well, maybe we shouldn't be spending a lot of time talking about what the Nazis believe. Maybe we should be looking at to make sure that there aren't specific concepts of Nazism that are being snuck into other elements of the teaching, such as, blood and soil arguments or race realism arguments or something to that effect. And the problem I have with CRT or just CRT concepts being taught in school is because it does seem like a lot of the people that are pushing this do believe in CRT. They're not just simply saying like, well, here's a descriptive thing, here's one of many philosophies, and let me describe it to you the way you would in like, a college or maybe even at a high level high school philosophy class. This stuff is taught prescriptively as if this is true.
Yeah. So I think one thing I'd say about that is that I am skeptical about how much stuff that, at a lot of these places was ever in a high school classroom. Mm-hmm. It's really that similar to CRT. I think that's actually one of the reasons to worry about a chilling effect, because it's not like, oh, well, we had Derek Bell in the curriculum before and now we'll just take it out because the state legislature says to. It's that like, oh, they're like very upset and they want us to, and they have this really vaguely worded law that we now have to abide by. Shit, what do we do to abide by it? And that is, I think, something that, I think makes schools less places that are open to people thinking about ideas and developing critical thinking skills and all that. So that's one thing. I think that and I'm certainly not denying that.
You don't think they talk about white supremacy in school? I mean, they talk about it in popular culture all the time. They brought it up in the Barbie movie. I mean, come on.
So, well, this is part of the first thing I was saying, that I think about how
it's separated from Marxism is what you're saying.
Or CRT specifically.
No. I mean, we're not talking about Marxism at all right now, I think, right?
Okay.
I think about CRT. Right? They have that I don't think I don't think like I think it's probably unhelpfully overextending the concept of CRT to say like any mention of white supremacy counts as CRT. But I'm certainly.
Well, I mean, how are you defining CRT? Just like a simple definition.
So wait. Okay, there's a couple of things. First of all, I just want to be clear. When you say critical thinking, you mean it in a classical sense. You don't mean like critical theory sense, right? Just to be clear.
I mean like critical thinking, like you're good at interrogating ideas.
Okay, yeah. Just want to make sure. Okay, so to what you're saying, Adam. Obviously, we can talk about white supremacy. It has nothing to do with CRT. If you're talking about like slavery or Nazism or something to that effect, is obviously this idea that white people have some kind of race realist supremacist position over non-white people. But then if it's talked about in terms of like, we currently live in a white supremacist society and we are kind of inculcated with white supremacy. And let me talk to you all about how there's like all this stuff is still inherent in our system.
Properties of whiteness. Yeah.
Right. Then that is when we're straying into the CRT territory. So that would be the difference.
Yeah. So I think that, part of the difference between us here might be that even though I think I disagree with a lot of actual CRT and a lot of the stuff that you're kind of associating with CRT, although to the extent that CRT is like this thing that comes out of critical legal studies, that's this sort of, theoretical framework. I worry about how wide we're casting the net, but I think another difference is just like, I think resist the Nazi analogy. I think that even, I think, I don't know, I disagree with a lot of stuff that I don't think is as bad as the Nazis. And
he's not saying
it. Yeah, I'm not saying it is as bad. I'm just saying, if there's some philosophy that I think is very against the philosophy I like and the philosophy against, liberalism and American values, I don't really want that being taught prescriptively in school by people who I think want it to replace and supplant the American philosophy.
This is why I used creationism, Sitch, because it's like less offensive.
Well, I mean, but this is the point, though, that if you're saying, I think the sort of force of the Nazi analogy is, here's something that's so bad that we sort of think it should be outside of the conversation. That this is something we should just kind of have a taboo about, where like this is sort of off limits. We've all decided.
Well, why is Nazism so bad?
I mean, that's I think, why is Nazism so bad? I mean, that's okay. So I think genocide is really bad. I think that I think there are probably a lot of reasons.
Well, you just say with genocide, genocide's fine. It's a philosophy that's obviously led to widespread genocide, right?
And you agree. Hold on, just 1 second.
Okay,
look,
sure.
You also agree, like creationism is not sinister, right? They literally teach it on Sunday, but we still don't teach it in school.
Sure. But I did make that distinction earlier, right? That, like, in other words, that I have no problem with, like, in the context of...
Look, here's the point that I'm making. Sitch laid out a very good example. Like, if we have Nazis in school talking about Nazism and teaching Nazism, I'm saying it's the exact same when the Christians, the evangelicals, want to go into school and they want to surreptitiously teach your kid creationism. It's the exact same thing. It just avoids the whole genocide topic, which triggers people.
So, okay, I'd like to address both of these, but we kind of have to decide which one, and then give me a minute to do it, and then we can, then we could do the other one. So yeah, if we want to start,
well, as long as you're going to address it not from we are comparing CRT to this other thing. We're talking about
at a certain point, you're just going to have to let me say it and then decide whether whether it's okay. It's
but that's not what we're doing. That's the only reason why I'm trying to.
Okay, but like, you literally don't even know where I was going with that because you're not letting me say it. So,
go ahead. You have the floor.
So yeah, okay. Really quickly, first on creationism, I think that the context matters. I think that the objection to creationism, or at least the objection I would find most compelling to creationism, is less about the controversialness than about the sort of scientific rigor. And I think that in a science class, I would have a problem with it. But look, if you're in a philosophy class and you want to have an argument that that the world must have been created by God, no problem whatsoever teaching it in that context. If we're going to talk about the Nazi one, my point, and I'm not saying that you think it's as bad, but is that thinking through why, it's sort of just so easy to nod along to, like, yes, of course, we should be cracking down on the hypothetical Nazi teachers. I think the reason we have that reaction is because we've sort of decided as a culture that Nazism is just totally off limits. It's kind of not even up for debate, really. And I would say, and I mean, look, this is also my problem with a lot of well, hold on, just let me.
Well, I keep interrupting you because you're not answering the question.
I'm trying so hard to answer the question, but
you're missing our point. That's why I keep interrupting.
Let Ben answer and then let me respond to that.
Okay,
go ahead.
Yeah, let me just get through it, and then you can decide whether I'm missing your point, because I'm keep trying to make a really straightforward point, and then so
right, I get it. Go ahead.
So the reason, so this is also my problem with a lot of leftist stuff that I think is too moralistic and censorious. That sure, all cultures are going to have taboos. I don't deny that, right? Things that we just decide are kind of off limits that are not even really up for debate. But I worry about expanding what we think is off limits and not really up for debate. And I worry about that with some lefty stuff that I don't think takes the sort of value of free speech and open debate about controversial ideas seriously enough. And I worry about it with stuff like so-called anti-CRT laws that I think overextends the concept. I think some of these things, like, are huge parts of American political discourse, and I think sort of policing classroom discussion to make sure that nothing in the vicinity of them is even discussed. I think it's too chilling. I don't deny that there are teachers who are going to do cringe things that I don't like. They're social justice-y, that, I'm sure you could come up with tons of examples. There's a zillion teachers in America, but I worry more about sort of silencing classroom discussion and shutting down that kind of exploration of ideas and development of critical thinking skills in classrooms than I worry about, the cringe.
Right. So I do want to address the chilling thing because I think that's important. But before I do, so the reason I asked why is Nazism dangerous and why it shouldn't be taught? And I agree with you. I mean, obviously, I am Jewish. I don't want Nazism to be taught in America. Is that, because it's, and I agree that if you ask most people this, they say, well, it leads to a lot of genocide. And the reason I brought that up is because I feel like you could very well, maybe you would not obviously not make this argument, but a lot of people in America, especially people on the right, would make the exact same argument about teaching anything related to communism because of all the people that were killed under communist regimes for various reasons. So I don't know. I'm not sure that that's like a good way of conceptualizing the argument.
Well, and just to get my problem on the table, look, I'm making a distinction between teaching something descriptively and proscriptively, and you keep defaulting to the fact that they, just assuming people are teaching it descriptively, when Sitch's examples are people who are hardcore Nazis, or my example is hardcore evangelicals, who are kind of saying, we're teaching it descriptively, but really are teaching it proscriptively.
Yeah. So, I mean, on the communism point, I mean, I think that I'm sure that they would make that argument. Certainly, if that's supposed to have anything to do with CRT, see the bulk of our previous discussion about why I think those are completely unrelated concepts. But on a more general level, like, I think that sort of exploring why we have this Nazi taboo is I mean, I think that could be an interesting discussion, but I think that the sort of bigger thing for me is, are we more worried about us not having enough taboos about which ideas are off limits for discussion, or are we more worried about having too many taboos about which ideas are off limits for discussion? And I know, Adam, that you're making this descriptive prescriptive distinction, but even in the course of making that distinction, I think you're sort of acknowledging the blurriness, that you're saying, well, they might claim that they're doing it, prescriptively, descriptively, but, we really know that they're prescriptive, and a lot of these laws are not, that, like, again, at least the ones that actually extend what's already illegal are not really making that distinction. And this is, I think, the real question here about how you feel about these laws is, are you sort of, worried that, essentially having, the state legislature, peering over the shoulder of classroom teachers to make sure that nothing slips into sounding, too prescriptive or whatever, that, like, do you want to err on the side of more of that or less of that? I think that's going to be a big distinction here.
Well, I mean, we do, obviously.
Yeah, we already do that.
I assume you agree. Like, we all have
standards. I didn't say it as an absolute. I said, do you want to err on the side of more?
Right, I understand. Right. Because we have standards for public schools, and, the left is it seems usually the left is one kind of concerned about how, with the private school vouchers, and it's, they want to make sure the private schools follow standards and all these things too, which that argument kind of stemmed, my understanding is that argument really stemmed from making sure that Christian schools were teaching things up to state standards. So there was this concern about misinformation or prescriptive things being taught in, schools that were receiving public funding. So I do think that is definitely the consideration of the electorate and of the state. But in terms of, like, what side are we going to err on? I mean, normally I would agree that I'm on the side of trying to err for more freedom. And this is why I did bring up the prescriptive descriptive thing, because if I felt confident that people, like when people teach Nazism, it's not really, not only am I not concerned that the teachers are not Nazis, but I'm also not concerned that like people understand what it is. Like if teachers start talking about Nazis, everyone understands what it is. If people start talking about CRT, it is vague because I would argue, because not just that there are people on the right that do label things that are not CRT, but because there has been a completely dishonest or ignorant attempt by the mainstream media to basically just say, oh, CRT is just teaching about Black history. CRT is just teaching about systemic racism. And that's not true. CRT is a very specific worldview that is very different from the classical liberal civil rights movement about how races should interact with people in American society. And I think if you look at these CRT laws, I haven't listened to the specific blocked and reported podcast that you're referring to, but the CRT laws that I've seen, or the anti-CRT laws, all of them seem to be kind of what you were saying as mostly what I would consider performative, in terms of they're outlawing things that we would all imagine should be outlawed anyway. And yet we don't see the newspapers and the media just saying, oh, all this stuff is totally fine. Who cares? They all go, oh my God, this is the secret Republican dog whistles to stop people talking about Black history. And they make kind of the chilling effect argument that you make. But when I read these laws, they seem pretty clear to me what is permissible, what is not permissible. And if there was some concern about like what exactly they mean, I would believe that Democrats or even the state legislatures, some have done this, Oklahoma has done this, have laid out extra criteria to more explicitly explain what is permissible, what is not permissible under these guidelines. And I think this chilling effect is literally created by the misinformation of the media using this as a political wedge issue just to attack Republicans. It is not really inherent in the law itself.
Okay, so we have a disagreement about the law. I think that, again, some of them I think are just performative. I think the ones that aren't often are pretty vague. And there really is a problem there. I guess we want to go deeper on that. We'd have to start looking at like the text of some of these. But I'd also make a distinction about, okay, is CRT just like sort of talking about the history of like slavery and segregation and stuff? Well, if we literally mean critical race theory like Derek Bell and Kimberly Crenshaw, no, definitely not, right? It's definitely like goes way beyond that. But if you say, well, are some of these anti-CRT laws ones that would legitimately make people nervous about talking about those subjects because for fear that the wrong parent could think that they're running afoul of some of this stuff, then I actually do think that's a legitimate concern. But where I am going to agree with you is that, yeah, look, I mean, some of the media coverage is, I think that there's a lot of media in 2023 that's just all about sort of pandering to narratives that are going to make whatever portion of the audience you still have in a very fractured media landscape very whipped up about it, and like oftentimes is going to be misleadingly incomplete and etc. And I think that both the sort of kind of original panic that generated a lot of these laws, that they're all that, oh, your teachers were all teaching your kids to hate white people, and a lot of the oh my God, every single one of these things is banning us from talking about slavery kind of response. I think both of those are probably oversimplified narratives that are maybe latch on to bits and pieces of the truth, but I do think we have kind of a broken media landscape where there's like way too little there's way too little incentive to add nuance that your audience isn't going to like.
Is there one of the anti-CRT laws that that you think is a problem that I can kind of like latch onto? Because the ones I've seen, I just don't really see what the problems are.
Sure. So I can, if you want to keep talking, I can look up the one I was originally looking at.
Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.